She didn't walk away because you lacked value. She walked away the moment your life stopped moving without her. I want you to sit with that for a second because this is where most men misunderstand what really happened. When she pulled back, your instinct may have been to lean in harder, to explain yourself, to reassure her, to show consistency, loyalty, emotional presence. You thought love meant tightening your grip, but desire doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to polarity, and polarity disappears the moment a man abandons his own center. As a psychologist, I've seen this pattern repeat endlessly. Men believe women leave because of arguments, timing, or compatibility. Those are surface reasons. Beneath them is something quieter and more unsettling. Attraction faded when she stopped feeling emotional movement around you, when your moods began orbiting her reactions, when your sense of direction became dependent on whether she was choosing you that day. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women don't leave men who are grounded in their own lives. They leave men who make them the emotional anchor of their identity. That feels flattering at first. Then it feels heavy. Then it feels unsafe. Because no one wants to be responsible for another adult's sense of purpose. Right now, if you're honest, part of you is replaying moments, wondering where things shifted, imagining what you could say if you had one more chance. That mental loop is a signal that your energy is turned backward, and backward energy is not attractive. It's grasping, even when silent. What she felt wasn't hatred or indifference. It was a subtle loss of tension. Desire needs space to breathe. When you became predictable in your emotional availability, always there, always responsive, always accommodating, the mystery dissolved. And without mystery, attraction becomes obligation. This doesn't mean you were weak. It means you were emotionally exposed without being emotionally anchored. You gave closeness without containment. And her nervous system read that as instability, not intimacy. Now listen carefully because this is where the shift begins. The moment you stop orienting your inner world around her behavior, something changes. Not externally, internally. Your body slows down. Your mind stops scanning for signals. You begin returning to routines, goals, and self-respect that existed before her approval became currency. She feels that shift even in silence, not because of magic, but because humans are exquisitely sensitive to emotional posture. When you stop reaching, the dynamic recalibrates. The man she thought she understood becomes unfamiliar again, and unfamiliar is powerful. Her certainty about you begins to crack. She told herself a story to justify leaving. That you'd always be there, that you'd wait, that you'd eventually chase or explain or break. When that doesn't happen, discomfort sets in. Curiosity follows. This is not about revenge or tactics, it's about restoring balance. When you return to your own axis, you stop bleeding emotional urgency. And urgency is what killed attraction in the first place. If you do nothing else, do this. Stop collapsing inward. Stand where you are. Let your life move forward without asking permission. That alone begins the process most men never realize they've already won. When she comes back, it will almost never sound like regret. It will sound like curiosity pretending to be casual. This is where men misunderstand female psychology the most. They expect a dramatic apology, a clear confession, or an emotional explanation. That almost never happens first. Instead, she tests the water, a short message, a reaction. A question she doesn't actually need answered. This is not confusion, it's calibration. She is feeling whether access to you still exists. Your response in this moment determines everything. Most men respond from relief. They flood the conversation with warmth, availability, and emotional transparency. They think, I can fix this now. And in doing so, they hand back the power they unknowingly reclaimed through absence. The dynamic snaps back to where it was when attraction died. What she is actually listening for is not your words, it's your nervous system. Are you calm or are you trying to secure her again? Are you grounded or are you subtly asking for reassurance? Women are biologically attuned to emotional leadership, not dominance, regulation. If she senses that your emotional state is still dependent on her response, interest collapses again. Not because she's cruel, but because her system recognizes instability. Desire cannot rest on emotional volatility. This is why silence alone isn't enough. You can ignore her and still be desperate internally, and she will feel that. The goal was never to disappear, it was to stabilize. When you respond, you do so as a man who already has a full emotional life. Warm, but not eager. Present, but not waiting. Curious, but not chasing. You don't rush to clarify the past. You don't reopen wounds. You don't ask where you stand. Why? Because a man who knows where he stands doesn't need to ask. Here's a truth that changes everything. Women don't return to men who want closure. They return to men who became unanswered questions. When you stopped seeking explanations, she started questioning her own narrative. When you stopped asking to be chosen, she began wondering why she lost access. Your steadiness now creates something rare, emotional gravity. She feels pulled toward you, but unsure why. And that uncertainty reignites attraction far more effectively than reassurance ever could. If she brings up the past, you don't defend yourself. You don't over-explain. You acknowledge lightly and remain grounded. That signals growth without announcement. And growth that doesn't need validation is deeply compelling. Understand this clearly. If she comes back emotionally unsure, nostalgic, or testing boundaries, your job is not to convince her of anything. It's to let her feel the emotional contrast between the man she left and the man standing in front of her now. And that contrast speaks louder than any promise. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when her feelings either deepen again or shut down permanently. That moment happens when she realizes you no longer need her to feel whole. Most men never reach this stage because they mistake self-control for coldness. They pull away emotionally, thinking distance alone creates desire. It doesn't. What creates desire is emotional self-trust, the ability to feel without leaking need, the ability to care without collapsing. Women don't fall back in love with effort, they fall back in love with coherence. If she senses that you've built a life that holds you, friends, purpose, routines, physical strength, inner direction, something in her relaxes. Not because she fears losing you, but because she no longer feels responsible for your emotional stability. That freedom is intoxicating. It allows desire to return without guilt. This is where unconscious testing begins. She may mention memories, she may flirt lightly, then pull back. She may bring up what went wrong to see if you tense up. These aren't games. They're nervous system checks. Is this man solid, or will he crumble again? If you react defensively, explain yourself, or subtly seek reassurance, her system notes it instantly. Attraction drains, not because you were wrong, but because you revealed that your center still lives outside you. But if you remain calm, open without urgency, engaged without attachment, something shifts. She feels something rare, emotional safety without control. That combination is powerful. It creates longing instead of resistance. You don't tell her you've changed. You don't promise anything. Change doesn't speak. It shows in your pacing, in your boundaries, in the way your happiness doesn't spike when she leans in or crash when she pulls away. This is why women often say, "You feel different." What they mean is, "I can't predict you emotionally anymore, and that makes me feel drawn to you." If she truly begs to be with you again, it will not come from manipulation or silence. It will come from contrast, from realizing that the man she left didn't freeze in place. He grew, he stabilized, he became someone she now has to qualify for. And here's the deeper truth. Even if she doesn't return, this version of you wins. Because a man who can regulate his emotions, maintain direction, and hold connection without need becomes magnetic everywhere, not just with her. This is not about getting her back. It's about becoming the man who never loses himself again. Now we arrive at the part most men avoid because it requires brutal honesty, not about her, but about you. Ask yourself this without flinching. If she walked back into your life today, would you be welcoming her from strength or from relief? That difference decides whether history repeats itself or transforms completely. Because if your growth was fueled only by the hope of her return, it will collapse the moment she feels secure again. Real power is quiet. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need an outcome to justify its existence. Here is the paradox few men understand. The moment you no longer need her to come back is the moment she is most likely to try. Not because you withheld love, but because you reclaimed yourself. Neediness repels not because it is weak, but because it transfers responsibility for your happiness onto someone else. And that weight kills desire. If she returns, she must return to a man who has standards. Not punishments. Standards. You don't reopen the relationship at the exact point it broke. You allow it to rebuild slowly, with presence and discernment. You let her invest emotionally again. You don't chase reassurance. You observe consistency. And if she never returns, something even more important happens. You no longer live with the quiet belief that love requires self-abandonment. You stop overgiving. You stop shrinking your life to fit inside someone else's uncertainty. You become the kind of man who chooses relationships from fullness, not from fear. This is why men who truly evolve often say the same thing. Losing her was the catalyst, not the loss. It forced you to confront patterns you ignored. It demanded emotional maturity. It pushed you into self-respect. Before this video ends, I want you to answer this honestly in the comments. Did losing her make you chase harder, or did it force you to finally stand still and grow? If this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe and share it with a friend who needs this message right now.